Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Adam Packard, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited about our time together, and I cannot thank you and your dad enough for connecting us. This is really cool stuff. Like, I talked to your dad, like I told you before, and he's like, "Oh, you've got to talk to Adam. You've got to talk to my son. He's fascinating." I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay." This is good, right?
Let's hope I don't disappoint then.
A little paternal pride, baby, right?
Yeah, right.
So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
So like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born. I got some of that from your dad, by the way, but we're going to start with where you were born and go all the way up to today. And then we can talk about anything that you're working on, including your podcast. I'd love to talk about that.
Sure.
You up for that?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Cool, buddy. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So where were you born?
I was born in Waterville, Maine.
Yeah.
And grew up in Winthrop. So about 30 minutes from Waterville. But yeah, small town, 79 kids in my high school class, 300 in the whole school. Didn't have a single stoplight in the town we grew up in. No fast food restaurants. Could walk to school. So small town guy.
So what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
Oh, I mean, everybody knew everybody. It was just a great environment to grow up in. I mean, being a small knit community, I was able to play all the sports, and I was pretty good at sports. I probably could have made a bigger school's team, but it gave me a chance to know everybody in town, and everybody was friends, and it just seemed like a big family.
Like a big Norman Rockwell painting, right?
Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
So growing up in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
I always loved math. I was a math guy. Most people weren't, but I was. I remember growing up, and my parents were telling me, when they were driving me to preschool or even school, I would count all the telephone poles and tell my mom, "Hey, did you know there's 337 telephone poles from here to the school?"
Wow.
And so I was always into math and numbers, and that was probably my favorite subject.
That's cool, man. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
I was definitely my dad. And then aside from him, I know it's kind of an easy answer, but I would say the coaches that I had in high school. My basketball coach was a complete hard and really difficult, but looking back, he was really good and kind of got the best out of us. Golf coach as well, tennis coaches. So I would say the coaches that I had were probably the biggest influence when I was growing up.
That's awesome. So you leave high school, you graduate high school, then where do you go?
I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was good at golf. My dad was a golfer. He got a golf club in my hands when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. He dropped me off at the golf course after school, and I'd spend 2 or 3 hours just practicing. Got really good, and so I played in high school. We won a state championship in high school, and I had a couple offers to play in college, and but it was like New Mexico State, Mississippi State. And we actually visited New Mexico State, which is in the middle of nowhere.
I've been there.
And I was like, yeah, it's not really where I want to go. So I thought about it, and I was like, well, I'm good at golf. I like golf. Why don't I just get into the golf business? So I went to Penn State. There was 4 schools. Nittany Lion, yeah.
My next door neighbor is.
Oh, is he? Oh, cool.
Both the husband and the wife, they're both Nittany Lion alums, dude.
But I've heard the stat that 1 out of 4 college graduates went to Penn State because they have so many campuses.
There's a big Penn State flag out front of their house right here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Literally waving as we speak.
Yeah. So at the time, they had a program called it's called the PGM program, Professional Golf Management. It was basically a training program where you take regular classes, but then augment it with some, golf specific classes.
Yep.
And then by the time you graduated, you had your Class A PGA license. And so there's only 4 schools at the time that had it. It was Mississippi State, New Mexico State, Penn State, and then a small school in Michigan called Ferris State. Now there's, I think, 20 or 30 that have it, but Penn State was the easy choice. I only applied to one school. It was the best academic school. It was close enough to home where I could drive home if I needed to, but far enough where the parents couldn't come visit me every weekend. It was a 10-hour drive.
Right.
So yeah, so I went to school for that and didn't know anybody when I showed up. But yeah, it was a cool experience. So, you know, I'm a big sports guy, so, you know, the football games with the tailgating and you know, having that big school atmosphere, but kind of still have that. It was nice because it was a huge school, but we had like a small group of like 100 or 150 guys that were going through the golf program. So it was like a school within the school. And so I think that kind of helped the transition.
Absolutely. Yeah, that camaraderie will never leave you, man. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you graduate from Penn State. Then where do you go?
Yeah, so part of the program was you had to do internships every summer at different golf courses. So most kids after, you know, high school, after college is done, they go home for the summers and stuff. But instead, I interned at different golf courses. So I worked at this golf course in just outside of Boston. It was a private club where all the Boston Bruins played. So I got to hang out and clean Ray Bork and Cam Neely's clubs, and so that was a cool experience. And the next summer I went to, it was very cool. Then the next summer was even cooler. I went to a place called Hudson National, which is in Westchester, New York, and it was one of the most expensive golf clubs you could join in New York. So like all the New York Knicks would play there. So I remember one morning I walked in and Isaiah Thomas was sitting there waiting to be checked in. The guy that started Snapple, if you remember Snapple back in the day, this guy's name was Dave Peltz. He used to fly his helicopter in and landed on the driving range. So it was like money, right? They didn't have, there was no golf carts. It was all hand mowed and everything, all caddies. And so I was the caddy master there. So I got to, you know, pair up the caddies with the members. So that was a super cool experience. That's awesome. And then the summer after that, I worked at Pinehurst, where they had the US Open when Payne Stewart won.
Yeah, with Payne Stewart.
So I was there for that. Yep. So that was pretty cool. We were standing on top of the roof on the clubhouse and watching the last group come through. Wow. And then my last internship. So the last internship, you kind of transition to, this is going to be my role. So I actually got into teaching, and I was hired by a company called Golf Tec, which at the time was pretty small, and now it's pretty well known. You've probably been there.
Taking lessons from them.
Taking lessons there.
Yeah.
So I interned there, and I had the choice of either going to Denver, Houston, or somewhere else. And we were going to go to Houston, but we ended up in Denver. And so one of my college roommates and I both took that position. We drove out to Denver. Funny story, driving out to Denver, we were kind of racing, not speeding too much, but when we saw a state line coming up, we would try to race across the state line and see who would make it first. Right. And we were driving past Ohio and Indiana, and I floored it. I had an old 4Runner at the time, and I just immediately, the car just shut off, and I could, it was going like 70 miles an hour, and I couldn't even steer. So car broke down, had to tow it to Denver, which was not fun. But yeah, started in Denver, and I, after college, lived there for, was there for about 4 years and gave lessons to, you know, all the Denver Broncos and cool guys like that. But just got burned out. I mean, I think one year I gave 2,500 lessons in 10 months, and, you know, it was fun for a while. It was a good experience, but I always tell people the golf industry it's fun. But you work long hours, you don't make much money, and you never get to play any golf. Yeah. So I was trying to figure out what do I do from here, right? So that's kind of so I was in Denver for about 4 years after college.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that's got to be like to teach people like me. You know, it's like I mean, I know what a golf ball is.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. I mean, the first lesson I gave that, you know, we're charging like $150 for the first lesson. And I'm thinking, I have no friggin' idea what I'm doing. Right. The guy on the other end doesn't know that I don't know, right? I've never given a lesson in my life before. Right. I know how to golf. Let me figure out if I can teach this guy. Yeah. So it was kind of a funny experience. You know, who's this 23-year-old kid that's giving me a golf lesson? But yeah, it was a fun experience. Yeah, it's cool. Golf Tec is cool. It's very cool. I'm a very happy customer. Yeah. I have a golf game that's like a circus act. It's, okay. Right. The good news is if you go play golf with me, afterwards you feel like Tiger Woods. The bad news is it's all false bravado, right? It's all false confidence, you know, right? It's like, yeah, right. So after Golf Tec in Denver, where do you go? So I worked at a golf course down in Castle Rock for a little bit. So I got out of the Castle teaching. Rock's gorgeous. Oh my god. Castle Rock it was not built up like it is now. This is early 2000s, and so there was a little, you know, community, city golf course, but it was awesome.
It's
So I worked
beautiful up
there
there.
for maybe a year or two, something like that. But yeah, it was, a better experience than Golf Tech just because I could get outside and do more things. But
Sure.
yeah, but I was kind of, itching to get out of the golf business.
So what was the one thing that you learned being in the golf business that you took with you?
Oh man, patience. I'd say, um, probably mostly from the teaching, right? You'd give someone a lesson, give them something to work on, they'd come back, they hadn't worked on anything, you give them the same lesson, they go out, do the same thing, didn't work on it, come back, and trying to be positive and upbeat and patient with people. I hope that carries through. And my wife tells me I'm not the most patient person now, so maybe it didn't translate, but I would say probably patience.
It was an adaptation thing, right?
Yeah. It's evolved after you get married, things change. So
So I'm not the most patient person either. That's why I'm laughing, because
yeah,
I've literally received that feedback too. So patience is a virtue, right? And I'm not very
yeah,
virtuous.
yeah,
So you get out of the golf game.
yeah.
What do you do then?
So my dad was a Dale Carnegie instructor,
Yeah.
and so he encouraged me to take a Dale Carnegie class.
Yeah.
So I did that when I was in Denver. I having to give speeches in front of strangers and start to work that muscle, which was interesting. But my brother actually sent me my first personal development program. It was Jim Rohn's The Day That Turns Your Life Around.
I love Jim.
Fantastic. I love Jim Rohn. So he sent me that. I listened to that. And I just started thinking, it's like, what am I going to, I don't want to be in the golf business. I was working 70 hours a week, at the golf course. I was bartending at a Mexican restaurant at night. So I was literally busy all day, every day.
Yeah.
And I listened to that program, went to the Dale Carnegie course. And then my brother actually, after high school, moved to Arizona and went to Arizona State.
Yeah.
He wanted to go to a big party school, far away from home. But after college, he started working for a motivational speaker, sales trainer named Tom Hopkins.
Yeah.
And he was traveling around and, managing the seminars and doing that. And there was two guys that traveled on the road, and one of them decided to leave and do something else. So Jeff called me up and said, hey, there's a spot open if you want to travel with me and Tom and do something different. And so I packed up, moved down to Arizona, interviewed, and then my brother and I started working for Tom Hopkins, and we were his, road managers basically I did it for about 5 years. We were together, the three of us, about 3 years. But yeah, that kind of got me into the personal development and self-improvement world.
Have you ever met anybody more charming than Tom Hopkins, honestly?
He hasn't changed in 40 years. I love the guy.
Oozes charisma, right? I mean, the guy is just the man.
Yeah.
And the first time I ever saw him speak, I went up and shook his hand afterwards and told him how unbelievably remarkable I think he is. And he sort of looked at me like, well, thanks. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I know this already, right? What you're saying to me, I already know. This is not news. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was really cool. It was quite the moment. I'd love to get him on our podcast.
I can try to arrange that. I haven't talked to Tom in years, and I think I don't know, he's must be pushing 80 something right now. But yeah, I can connect you with someone that can get you in touch with him for sure.
That'd be huge. I would love that. That would be so cool. So you go to work for Tom Hopkins for 5 years. What's the number one thing you learned working for that guru?
That I had to work for myself.
Yeah.
We'd be in the back selling the tapes, tapes back then. Yeah. Tapes and books and stuff, and hearing these guys stand up and sharing their success stories of, I'm making 100K, I'm making 300K. I'm just sitting there like, I'm making 30K or 35K. Right. Like, what am I doing here? Yeah. Again, but it was a great experience because it kind of exposed me to that world. And but I realized that it was going to be a stepping stone, right? It was going to be a learning experience. I didn't go to work for Tom, as a career. I went to work for Tom to learn what I wanted to do and use that as a kind of a stepping stone. But yeah, so that's kind of when we found our next, what's the next thing? Do you want me to dive into that or?
Absolutely. But I have one quick question before you dive in. So did Tom borrow your car?
Tom borrow my car? I don't believe so.
Your dad was telling me a story about him. It was one of you boys. He borrowed one of your cars. And then that son went and picked him up and took him to lunch in Tom's Rolls Royce.
That was Jeff. That
Was
wasn't
that your
me.
brother?
Yeah.
What a cool story, man.
Yeah, I know. His old Rolls Royce, one of those old school ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it, man. I love it. Okay, so let's go on to the next thing.
It's funny because we actually had Tom's car for a while, and it was parked in our driveway at this little house we had in Scottsdale. It was a little, 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom house, and we have a Rolls Royce parked out front, which is just hilarious.
I
Yeah.
love that guy, man.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I had to ask. So what's the next thing after Tom Hopkins?
My dad's had his hands in everything and tried multiple things, but he actually, being the salesperson that he was, had the idea to come up with a greeting card business, but make it more designed for salespeople, right? There was cards you could buy, and you could buy blank thank you notes, but there weren't really any cards that were designed for, hey, thanks, thanks for being a client, or, appreciate the referral. There was nothing like that at the time. So he started designing his own cards and making them, and, he had shoe boxes of cards and other cards that we would sell. So, what was nice about working with Tom was, we were on the road. It could have been, a week or, 2 weeks a month. But when we were home, I didn't have to go to the office at all. I just dropped off the sales and could do my own thing. So it gave us a chance to do something on the side. So we first started doing, selling these shoe boxes of greeting cards. And I would go into gas stations and flower shops and, fill the racks and sell more cards. It was a hustle and it was a grind. But we met someone through a friend of my brother that knew a guy that was with this new company called SendOutCards, which was a network marketing company that started back in 2002, 2003. And he said, you need to meet my friend Jordan because he has a greeting card business. You guys are in the greeting card business. Maybe there's some synergy. Right. And so my dad met Jordan at Starbucks, kind of told him, what he had, and Jordan showed him what he had, which is basically, we can do what you're doing selling these physical cards, but imagine just going to a website, typing out a card, hitting send, and a real card gets mailed for you. Ooh. And my dad was like, oh, that sounds cool.
I like
so
that.
He shared it with my brother first, and my brother says yes to everything. So he immediately came on board. They're both very quick. I'm more of the analytical one. They're both more of the just jump at it, right?
You're like, okay, slow your roll. Let's think about this and talk about it for a second.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, all right, I'll watch this thing unfold and see if I want to be a part of it. So, cool. So they joined SendOutCards and started to promote it a little bit, and my brother was starting to make some money. And then they sponsored one of Tom's boot camps that he has out in Arizona every year. So a 3-day boot camp. So they would have the laptops in the back of the room. And it was funny. My dad had his, shoebox of cards still. Yeah. And here was the pitch. It was, hey, we can do your cards for you. You can either buy this shoebox full of cards and write them and mail them out yourself. Yeah. Or they're also on this website. Let me show you how to send a card. Oh, you just sent a real card to your wife.
Yeah, we got this really cool thing. Yeah,
for a fifth of the price, right? Yeah. And we're like, this is such a no-brainer. So they ended up signing up like 80 people at the event. Wow! And after the end of by the third day, I looked at my dad and I was like, okay, I'm in. I was like, I'll do this. I was like, if you guys can sell this, I can sell this.
By the way, so that's just for people that don't know, your dad is coming on the podcast in I think next week. But here's the thing, your dad used to teach for Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, which, by the way, I just listened to the other day. I had read it several times, but I just listened to it on audiobook the other day. And it's a classic. It's something everybody should just, on a regular basis, you should listen to it or read it. Your dad is the master. You know this, the absolute master. I just want this on tape of making friends and influencing people.
100%. Everybody loves
the master.
He's the mayor.
I'm not joking. We could have talked for 4 days straight. I mean, unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Yeah. So it was really cool. So he's the reason we met, by the way. He told me, he's like, you've got to talk to Adam. I'm like, absolutely, let's go. So it's cool.
Yeah. So by that third day, I was like, okay, I'm in, let's do this. And so I had, I got off to a slower start because they had already, kind of, gotten started on this. And so we just went all in, and it couldn't have been a better scenario, because every time I went to a seminar with Tom, of course I was working for him, but I'd be out in the crowd shaking hands. There was 500 salespeople at every seminar. Yeah. So I'd meet them and they'd ask me a little bit more about what I do. And I told them, and they said, that is interesting. So I would leave and I'd have a stack of business cards. Yeah, you would. I'd get home and just start calling, setting up appointments, selling people into the service. Yeah. And we immediately started to make a name for ourselves in the business, and people were asking, what are we doing? And speaking on stage and getting all these awards. And it got to the point where we were making so much more than we were making working for Tom.
Yeah.
And so my brother eventually left just to do it full time.
Yeah.
I stayed on because it was almost like a lifeline. I was like, why would I leave the situation? I'm getting 300 to 500 people a week that I'm meeting.
This is a no-brainer, man.
I've got my built-in prospecting. I don't need to do anything else. And so I stayed on with Tom for, a couple more years until we get to the point where I was like, I need to focus 100% on the business now, because I had teams growing in certain areas. But I was with Tom for a couple of years, just he and I, because I basically told the lady that was running it, I was like, don't hire another guy. I can handle this all by myself, and pay me a little bit more, but you don't need to pay another guy. Yeah. So I was taking advantage of making sure I met as many people as I could, grow the SendOutCards business as fast as I could. Sure. And that's kind of where it took off from there.
Wow, what a perfect deal. So you work with Tom for a couple more years, and then you finally make the decision, okay, I got to go do this full time. Mm-hmm. So you go out and do it full time. How long were you doing that? Are you still doing it?
No.
Okay. So how long?
I would say probably I probably started to lose interest about 2012, 2013. Okay. So a good run of about 8 to 10 years that I did it. Every network marketing company has challenges. None of them are perfect. The challenge for me was I was making good money, but I couldn't get my team, where I was. Company made some changes to the comp plan. People stopped working, just loss of direction and leadership. So I just got burned out and said, I need to try something else. So I dabbled in some other network marketing companies. I didn't go full in because I didn't want to lose my check from the other company. So I tried a few other things and eventually, kind of let it go and sold my position to a friend that wanted it. So I regret selling it because my dad and brother are still making residuals every single month. And I gave up mine about 10 years ago. Yeah. I'd probably still be getting a check every month, but I needed the money to move on to something else. So I took that out and tried some other network marketing companies. And then, from there, I actually got recruited to work at a network marketing company that's based here in Arizona. Yeah. Out of the blue, I got an email from a guy saying, hey, based on your background, we think you'd be a good fit for this company. It's called Isogenics. Have you heard of it? And I'd never worked really in a corporate role. I mean, working for Tom was a job, but it wasn't like a 9-to-5 job. Right. And so, But what was funny about Isogenics was I knew the owners because the guy that started it was a member at the same golf club that I belonged to. Oh, and so I basically called him up and I said, hey, Jim, his name was Jim Coover. And I said, hey, Jim, funny story. I got some recruiter that reached out to me asking me if I want to work at your company. Yeah. And he started laughing because he had no idea. He doesn't do that stuff. And he said, well, come in, drive down and I'll introduce you to some of the guys and, we know what you could do. So I drove down and interviewed and, got hired pretty quickly and was a regional manager of sales for a while and then director of sales and overseeing, about 40 states, right? Traveling all the time and doing trainings and, but it was cool being on the other side, right? Because I'd been in the field for so long, recruiting and training, and then moving to the corporate side to see what happens on the inside. And I was instantly connected to all the people that were building the business because I could relate to them. I knew exactly what they were doing. I knew the challenges and how to help them. And so I had that instant connection because there weren't really any people on the corporate side that had the field experience that I did. I don't think there was anybody. So that was a cool experience, but it was, it was a job, right? Yeah. And the company was based in Chandler. I was living in Scottsdale. Then we moved to Cave Creek, which is even further north, and the offices moved to Gilbert. So got to the point where it was an hour drive each way. Wow. And then I was on the road at least a week every single month. So it got to the point where, I wanted to do something else, but wasn't sure what that was going to be because at that point I'd gotten married and.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.